If you're hunting for a gaming PC that feels solid enough to run your favorite titles night after night, doesn't make you sweat when the room is already warm, and actually justifies the price tag, you're probably feeling a little stuck. The market is full of machines that flash crazy numbers on a spec sheet, but the real question is whether they'll sit nicely on your desk, stay quiet while you're on a voice chat, and still give you those buttery smooth frames when you finally hit that boss fight. Link is in the description if you want to check the product details on Amazon. Let's talk about the Skytech Azure, a pre-built that's trying to bridge the gap between just another box and the one that actually works for me. First off, the biggest hesitation most buyers have is the fear of overpaying for a system that looks impressive on paper but falls apart when you push it. With a Ryzen 7 7800X3D at the heart, you're looking at a CPU that's been praised for its gaming-centric cache architecture. In practice, that translates to noticeably higher frame rates in games that lean heavily on single-core performance, like *Fortnite* or *Valorant Star. I've seen people with older 5600X builds struggle to hit 144 frames per second on high settings, while the Azure comfortably cruises past that mark without needing to dial back textures. That's a real-world win if you've got a 144Hz monitor and want to actually use it. The graphics card is the RTX 5060 with 16GB of GDDR7 memory. It's not the flagship 4090, but for a 1080p 1440p setup it's more than capable. I ran *Cyberpunk 2077* on high-medium settings at 1440p and consistently landed around 7080 frames per second, which is enough for a smooth experience with a bit of room for VSYNC. If you're the type who jumps to ultra-high settings and expects 4K performance out of the gate, you'll probably feel the limits. That's the first practical trade-off. The Azure is aimed at the mainstream gamer who wants high refresh rates at 1080p or solid 1440p, not a 4K enthusiast. Now, the 1TB Gen4 NVMe SSD and 32GB of DDR56000 RAM are where the future-proof claim gets some credibility. The SSD's bandwidth means load times that feel instantaneous, think under 10 seconds to load a fresh *Elden Ring *World, versus the half-minute you might see on a SATA drive. The RAM capacity is generous enough to keep dozens of browser tabs, a game, and a streaming overlay running without hiccups. The downside: DDR5 still carries a price premium, and you'll rarely see that extra bandwidth being fully utilized in most games. It's more of a nice-to-have than a necessity, but it does add to the overall feel of having a high-end rig. Cooling is where the Azure really tries to stand out. The 360mm AIO liquid cooler with ARGB lighting does more than look good. It keeps the 7800X3D under 70°C even during marathon sessions of Red Dead Redemption 2 with all the visual effects cranked. For anyone who's ever had a noisy fan spin up to a scream after an hour of play, that's a genuine comfort factor. The only catch is that the radiator sits at the top of the case, which can limit airflow if you have a cramped desk setup. In a tight space, you might notice the case fans working a bit harder, leading to a subtle increase in overall noise. It's not deafening, but it's worth knowing if you need a whisper-quiet environment for streaming or recording. Power delivery is handled by a 650W gold-rated PSU. That's a sweet spot for the components you have. The GPU draws around 150W under load, the CPU peaks near 120W, and there's headroom for future upgrades like a bigger SSD or an extra drive. What you won't get is the luxury of swapping in a much higher-tier GPU later without also upgrading the power supply. If you plan on staying within the current generation's performance envelope, you're fine. If you think you'll jump to a 4080 in a year, you'll need to budget for a new PSU anyway. One of the less obvious strengths is the Wi-Fi 802.11 AC module. For a lot of gamers, especially those in apartments where running an Ethernet cable is a hassle, having a stable wireless connection matters. In my tests, the connection held up to 150 megabits per second with low latency in a standard 2-story house, which is perfectly adequate for competitive online titles. If you're a hardcore competitive player who demands the absolute lowest ping, you'll still want to wire it up, but for most users the built-in Wi-Fi removes a common pain point. The software side is refreshingly clean. There's no bloatware trying to push trial versions of antivirus or unnecessary system utilities. The machine boots straight into Windows 11, and you can start installing Steam, Epic, or whatever platform you prefer right away. That simplicity saves a few minutes of setup and keeps your system lean. So who should press add to cart for the Skytech Azure? If you're a serious gamer who wants high frame rates at 1080p or 1440p, values a quiet but effective cooling solution, and appreciates a fast SSD plus plenty.